Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from Maui, Hawaii, United States of America. August 11, 2021. And this will be the second part of a talk that I began the other day, Mind Art. Aesthetic cognitism. Dealing with the artistry, the sonic artistry, the auditory artistry, the invisible structures of felt consciousness, purposefully engaging those intelligent felt structures to evolve truth, purpose, and meaning, i.e. Dharma, Dhamma, the life of the yogi. Let me just pause here. Many of you know, but those of you who don't, and just to create a foundation for this talk, this sharing mind art, so much of my life, and I'm trying to increase the intensity, the volume of that engagement of my life, of taking separation and apartheid in all forms and discrimination out of consciousness. In other words, making my life, one's life, the Dhamma life. Making my life, one's life, an expression, an engagement, an evolution of Dhamma, meditation, mindfulness in dynamic, holographic, felt action. All times, all places, all postures, all states, all contexts, all degrees of complexity, an intelligently implied mindful engagement of consciousness in context to itself inside at the confluence of the senses and the felt reality of objects of senses that appear outside. And that invisible landscape aesthetic cognitism, mind art, the love, passion, the meditative exploration of language, of meaning, of purpose, of communication, of words as felt forms of the spirit, not concepts alone. And leaving a monastery, leaving a meditation retreat, leaving a workshop, I want to leave all of those frameworks behind. For me personally, they've been beautiful, but over the years, and even more so now, I am embarking upon a daily vocation of Dhamma meditation, the life of consciousness in context, a trans-religious, a trans-Buddhist filter, a world Dharma, to use a label, to make meditation the priority of my existence, full stop. To make yoga the priority of my existence, full expression. To make art out of yoga, to make art out of meditation, to create a cognitive aesthetic or artistry of the vocation of being alive. So I'm striving through my improvisational, extemporaneous expressions of Dhamma, a way of self-discovery, a way of communicating with people, some I know, some I don't know. I'd love to know all of you. And yet we have this pathway of the digital world to increase the volume, the intensity, the luminosity, the galactic intuition, if you will, of looking out at the heavens and feeling the eternity within, and the simultaneity of those worlds merging. And here we find ourselves sitting and walking in all the four great postures, and the fifth, all forms of behavior in between, standing, walking, lying down, and sitting. We find ourselves embodied all day until we die. And the Dhamma life is to live within that embodiment, right? Rather than doing yoga on a mat, meditation on a cushion, or assuming that my spiritual life, my Dharma life, will be best fulfilled when Burma reopens, if it ever will. But where I am, where I choose to walk and move and bend and think and feel, to increase the intimacy, the passion, the vocation of mindful intelligence applied within the framework of consciousness in form, having a love affair with my Dharma, having a love affair with my Jesus, having a love affair with my Mary, having a love affair with my mindful intelligence, having a love affair with you and me in the shared cognitive, emotional space of life. How to increase that, whatever one needs to do. I call that mind art, the love of understanding the waves and particles and the poetic syntax of words, to play in the artistry of shared space as a meditative asana. Thank you for tuning in today. Hope you're well. I was thinking about some aspects of the teachings of the Buddha, attributed to the Buddha. And so many of them, as I feel and discover them more intimately, are about awakening in context. Human life interacting with human life deliberately with an understanding of how to understand a truth-evolving moment in this shared space. Call it intimacy, call it liberation, call it realization, call it the nuministic, the existential, the wisdom of mutuality, purposefully dancing in higher formations of freedom. Qualities of uniqueness and creativity and pause and nuance and reflection, the art of the beautiful question, as it's been said. How to create a romantic, erotic, poetic, nuanced, shared, holographic reality between you and other, me and this, in a way in which there is something memorable and important and purposeful. I think it was Maya Angelou who said, "I've learned that people forget what you said. I have learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did," she said. "But people will never forget how you make them feel." I agree to a large extent with what she's saying. It's very inviting. How to make others feel, how to invite others into a feeling resonance with what you're feeling, how to create the sapio-emotional, shared, resonant aesthetic of feeling together in an evolving, opening, liberating, awakening. Okay, there's so many ways to have a dinner, go to a soiree. I was invited out last night and I participated in a very elegant, visual and energetic aesthetic that was beautifully created by the people who provided the invitation, those who came to the event. The color, the sound, the music, the lighting, the fragrances, the anointments that were taken to support luminosity and sensitivity, and the dance of human beings in this environment of co-creative, spiritual, emotional, existential, aesthetic in the context of a pandemic and delta, and vaccinations and all the various things that happen out here that happen also inside. But for a moment, for a few hours, for 4 or 5 or 6 hours, we sat and communed and played in a co-creative, what it felt to me, a co-creative, purposefully engaged, proportionate to the individual's consciousness and choice and intention, their mindfulness, a poetic, a sonic formation, a shared sculpting of awakening, a dharma, a sutta. All the Buddhist texts are about suttas, cognitive formations in shared space that, as I understand it, were brought forth to this very moment primarily by the voices of others, an oral tradition. And so I'm seeing more and more of how much the Dhamma in these original texts were about conscious or deliberate, purposeful creations of shared space and what individuals did there. And there's some talented minds according to those texts. And I can testify in my own humble research through monasteries in Asia that tradition of sonic, poetic, cognitive aesthetics for the purpose of transformational awakening, call it enlightenment, call it insight, panya, the embodiment of generosity, dana, sila, ethical intelligence, and bhavana, the poetic of transformational mind state development. Those dhammas live on. Why? Because you and me have chosen to purposefully embody the wisdom of the sonic exchanged for the elevation of wisdom. Words, language, mind art. Call it Buddhism, call it Dhamma, call it the revolution of the spirit, call it democracy in action, call it freedom of speech, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, call it freedom of conscience, the empowerment of creative dignity. Whatever, we're embodied creatures living through time, making choices with our hands and bodies and our various limbs and mind and that artistry called consciousness and context, all times, all states, all contexts, all degrees of complexity, in all time, every way, all state Dhamma, where we've removed partition, discrimination, and existential racism. We have included God and the holy and the prayer and the cathedral and the church and the hymn as an all-time event. Isn't that the quest to live in the spirit? Isn't that what we're all here to do, is to embody and to keep alive, keep fostering the holy all the time and take it down from the citadel of the material? Each of us empowering the evangelical transformational awakening of our finest respect for God. I use that word because it's meaningful to me, because it really speaks to the radiance of a lawful, principled Dhamma, a transformational intelligence that can be understood. I love that we are embodied with these cognitive qualities to be able to feel the wisdom to either engage something or to restrain something. conscience made real in shared space. And these Buddhist teachings are all about, when you play a little bit more, well, I encourage you, they're theater. It's existential theater, improvisational formations created in shared space with this constant direction, as I understand it, towards liberating the invisible from fear, greed, shame, indignation, totalitarianism, violence. Last night, we had an opportunity among the people that were there to play in cognitive, creative architectures that released us into more radiant forms of intimacy. There's something so spectacular that's given me so much more hope in dynamic felt, oxygenated, beautiful action as the psychic, intuitive, intersubjective, transcendental, physically eroticized, fully embodied in great posture in breath, out breath. It's so easy to neglect when we are living not to embody the asana that we would do in our yoga practice on a mat with a quality teacher helping us to align. But we're on our own with each other helping us to align in the holy. And how do we strengthen those fibers in our own mind and body so that we walk in dignity, that we keep our shoulders back in conscience, that we live in poetry, in the aesthetics of intimacy and compassion and love. And every day, in all postures, we have that choice within consciousness to give, to touch, to listen, to feel, to ask the most beautiful questions possible in this shared space of eternity cut back by mortality. Maya Angelou has said, "I've learned that people forget what you said. People will forget what you did," she said, "but people will never forget how you made them feel." That's one dimension. To totally engage in the wellness of your spirit and how you present and design and give forth your being, your body, your eyes, your ears, your time, your words, your forgiveness, your hope, your cultivation of interior beauty made real through the senses. Again, life as meditation, mind art, making those things so real together. Mind, heart, art felt in shared poetic, transformational space. Be a memorable event in the life of another. Be an absolute, radical, cognitive endowment of the holiest experience that you could bring forth. Why wait to a memorial, to a funeral, to elevate the status of someone no longer embodied that you loved, but you didn't really love in the way that you could love and will love if you only inspire that place in your heart, Alan, to live way out front and feel the way in which you make others feel and invite the poetic creativity of shared Dharma liberating intersubjective spaces together. Co-create, releasing portraits of wisdom. To kiss, sonically kiss, aesthetically kiss, to touch, to make love with consciousness. Cognitivism, aesthetics, the poetic of expression, the sonic dimensionality of words. It's not concepts alone. You're not just intellectual. You're poetic because you play in the theatrics of tone and space. In a way, we're conductors and architects and theologians and poets and philosophers and yogis of energy. And that artistry releases the fatigue of materialism, the fatigue of seeking fame, the fatigue and the nausea of criticism and hostility. So a lot of poetry isn't just beauty, 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 beauty. There's a lot of shadow and entanglement and darkness and complexity. I know even last night at the soiree, just sitting there and feeling every one of us embodied living creatures, to state the incredible obviousness of that statement, but every one of us having to translate emotions, emotionality. How do we elicit in ourselves the poetic beautiful, and how do we elicit in ourselves the impassioned nekama, the restraint, the aditant, the determination to restrain, and the kanti, state of poetry, of patience, to listen a little bit more fluidly without the presumption of assuming that what you hear is the truth of what's being said. Stay in wonderment. I think of the Buddha often as reference for inspiration, not as adoration as external object. I'm studying more over the days of the women who were in and around the teachings of Dhamma and the Buddha at the time, according to these ancient texts 2,600 years ago. And trying to look and study circumstances and contexts, not just the word of the Buddha, but trying to feel if as I were a Dhamma producer or a director or a Dharma cognitive screenwriter, trying to distill an ancient event and bring it into modern radiance. I think so many of these teachings that we read are the ability of the individual to transfer impressions through eye and reference through meaning and definition into a felt kind of oxygenation, if you will, to use that analogy, the oxygenation of the word as a nutrient to Dharma awakening. Felt reality, living meditatively. I do yoga every day, throughout the day. It's a felt authentication of emotions in alignment with physicality and sensations. My ability to glide across the landscape of the invisible and feel it as if I were touching erotically and sweetly the life and the body of a lover. In these teachings, the Buddha is inviting in conversations that transform. These are suttas, conversations that transform, rather than talking at one another. Purposeful creations of sonic architectures that release one from greed, anger, and delusion. Talk about a purposeful event. I mean, you just can't go Sermon on the Mount at a soiree unless you really want to drop in with a kind of trans DMT, unfiltered nakedness, where you are no longer in the hallucination of that, but you're in this togetherness, and you're co-creating there the invisible elevation of love, compassion, freedom, novelty. That's so sweet and beautiful to play in a trans Tantra-esque originality. Like last night, I was looking and feeling, where is there novelty in this discussion? And I was going like every second. And where is courage? And I was going like every second. Just to sit there and to participate, knowing that we're inbuilt with mortality, that at any second we could die, that the world could be hit by, an Earth-destroying asteroid, or that, who knows, a virus infiltrates the next great variant, and instantly we're frozen in the posture that we are right now. We're in infinite novelty. And the creation of that novelty with purpose, going right back to the teachings attributed to the Buddha, and back to the women who were there together as sisters, along with the men as brothers, in that communion, if you will, of the men and women in nature at the time of the Buddha, and how to feel, if I were a screenwriter, taking that into my own creative expression on Broadway, which I'm attempting. And Kema is a very fascinating woman for me. I sometimes move in life imagining that I'm meeting a Kema that day. An extraordinarily elegant soul, poetic, authentic, rad, cool, determined. She plays within the space of her truth. She moves with her own personal aesthetic, not contrived by Vogue and Cosmopolitan and Yoga Journal. Her asana is a trans-asanistic freedom, Kema. And she's meeting the Buddha, Gautama, of similar age, I think both 35, 36, young and robust and dynamic, and the tension of release is there, the Kema Sutta. And the Buddha is said to be able to play in his mind art with the prescient intuitive wisdom, rad, to feel into the more invisible landscapes of Kema's heart and mind and body and history throughout lifetimes together, proclivities. That's so cool. Like all these suttas, all these teachings are just deeper than the psychedelic filter and so luminous with clarity, not filtered with, deities and ghouls and entities and hallucinations and jaguars and snakes and symbolisms that we read into, to release us from trauma. These are invisibly, beautifully crafted, real holographic, cinematic events that are real to you and her and him and us. And you feel them inside. You're not hallucinating them. You're felt simultaneous, existentially releasing structures. And friend Gautama, aka Buddha, talks to friend Kema and creates an image sequence, just super rad theater, of a beautiful woman that within 90 seconds, this is my read, goes from exquisite 35 and transforms into a 98-year-old cripple who then falls to the earth, decays, dissolves, and disappears, all in 90 seconds. I was thinking last night at the soiree, we were talking a lot about the role of psychedelics, rebirth, meditation, grieving, heart, tenderness, life, death, freedom. We were all creating formations together. I wonder how deliberate and conscious. They were very mindful. But could they be orchestrated like Gautama and his ally, sister, came dancing in the 90-second creation of a form of life, you or me, and all of a sudden between you and me right now, we see replicas of you. I see replicas of me in the sonic shared holographic space. And in 90 seconds, 89, 80, 70, 60, 40, 30, 20, 10, I die, I dissolve, you die, you dissolve. And what is the experiential luminosity of that awakening? The release of grasping, the release of fear, the naturalness of transformation and impermanence. Anicca vata sankhara upadavaya dhammino. All things are impermanent in this poetic shared space of samsara. If only we didn't see it as a need to grasp and to hold and to congeal and to chisel and to nail and to power saw, but to release, to elevate, to create the poetry, the mind art, cognitism and the aesthetics of cognitism, language and words for transformational purpose. And Kema was said to have seen these images created by her friend Gautama. And she shed the historical, cognitive, outgrown, worn out skins of pretense and fear and ignorance and pride and separation and certainty, and relaxed into the freedom of this nibbanic, unconditioned purity of being. However you describe or want to feel the sonic vibration of nibbana in this space. Nibbana, the absence of greed, fear, and delusion, the absolute absence of pretense, the absolute absence of pride, and the elevation of creative experiential play. It's not a tragedy, this Dharma life, is it? Society and pornography and politics would like us to think of war and hate, love and greed, all these dualities. But the poetry of Nibbana in shared space, I invite you to invite me to invite our friends. Let's make life an experience of mind art. Let us invest in the holy, having a personal aesthetic called your choice of how to paint and love and to play and to touch and to kiss and to give birth to your child of love, your Kema, your Gautama, your theater, your artistry. Use your voice, overcome the hardships of creative fatigue. I don't know what to do because I don't have enough time to be true to me in the asana of freedom. Take the apartheid out of life. Take the obstacle out of time. Do everything we possibly can to see every challenge as the virtue of a poetic invitation to heighten our degree of expression into excellence. Let greatness be the soul of our dignity. Let it radiate through and heal every fiber of limitation. Let excellence be the oxygen of our consciousness. It doesn't have to be perfection. It just simply has to be what's unique to the artistry of one's own mind art. I've watched my daughter from pre-embryo to birth to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All those years of playing on a keyboard of infinite choices, watching her throw paint down. There was never a wrong way to be artistic. Making movies on my phone, Who cared what it looked like? It was the process of creating Kema events with her friend Gautama. So as I close today, may I invite you to keep inviting me and to invite our friends to live in this more remarkable, playful, fun, joyful, elevating, rapturous state of, hey, Jude. You know, Van Morrison's inarticulate speech of the heart. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to not know. It's okay to cry. A gentleman last night cried in our conversation with the most elegant, beautiful emotions of feeling his authenticity as I perceived it. He had his moment of Kema, transforming life with his wife into the future of heaven worlds. Together we all live and die and breathe. May I invite you to play in the mind art of understanding the role of language and expression and meaning and purpose. And again, coming to the end, let's make our Dharma life everything. All ways, all times, all postures, all states, all context, all degrees of complexity. Let us live and breathe as examples of the holy, as the experience of shared being, all times and all places. Taking the apartheid out of existence. Well, I'll close with what I remember to be of Kema. Kema, in that sonic shared space with her ally Gautama, both resonated in that co-created formation of transformational consciousness. I invite you in your dinners, and your soirees, your walks with your lover, your friends, your pets, your plants, your God, your goddess, play in co-creative, releasing formations of awakening. Make Dhamma the architecture of release from fear, the priority in the meaning of what we're talking about, how we sing and touch and live. Anoint each other with the liberty to grow on your terms, not my terms. So from my heart to yours, thank you for being a part of my life. None of us know when we'll live to that point when we pass on. Today we have a play, and that is artfully living in the most embodied, dignified, purposeful, dynamic, sensitive, vulnerable, truth to your own soul style of Dharma. Go there, elevate, evolve, co-create with your God and Goddess, with your Buddha, with your Kema, and awaken to the higher principles of the next iteration of your novel, your screenplay, your poetry, your book, your birth, your life, rebirthing into the future with grace and greatness. So from my heart to yours, Mind Art, part 2 today. I probably will go on tomorrow, God willing. And remember that the Dhamma, as I see it at least, is the embodied, felt experience of dignity and conscience and beauty and compassion and wisdom. And it's just coming to me right now. My beloved friend and mentor and ally and Dhamma sister, Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, the dictator in Burma, Ming Online, commanded that her attorney not speak to the world about her client, Daw Aung San Suu Kyi. And equally, they took her home and removed all of her personal belongings from her home. And there was something, as I read that this morning, that was so immediately violating to every principle of my heart, so contrary to the poetry and the music of my Dhamma in this talk. And I know her and I felt her. And I say this to you as a way in our own playful, transformational creations in the aesthetics of our lives over here, wherever we may be. Let us remember that our Dharma can extend to the heart and to the lives of others. Let us shower Kema Dharma, Buddha Dhamma, support, resident love and solidarity with Aung San Suu Kyi, with the people of Burma, with the political prisoners in prison cells around the world. Let us remember the beautiful music of compassion in dynamic action. Love in action, caring in action. And so from my heart to yours, thank you for being in my life, for being in my heart. And God willing, I hope to see you tomorrow here from Hawaii, 9:30 in the morning. Have a beautiful day, my friends. Thank you.